Hey, welcome to the 289th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patron Juan Sebastian Barron, but I call him Seabass, and he's actually producing a commercial I'm working on right now. I'm Oren and Carlyn.
And I'm Matt Enlow. We're here with Carlyn Hudson, who almost did a spit take after that show.
True. I was like, do you know this guy, Seabass? So I'm glad to hear that you did.
Oh, no, yeah, I know him. Well, so today we're going to talk about commercials. We've all been working on commercials a lot lately. We talk about commercials a lot on the podcast, but today I thought that we could talk about the myths, the pros, and the cons, because I've been recently on quite a few jobs. I've had various different challenges, and I've also at the same time been talking to a few filmmakers that are trying to get into commercials. And I thought, hey, this would be like a fun topic to basically turn into a listicle. You know, here's the things that a lot of people trying to get into commercials think about commercials that I personally don't find to be true. And I'd love to hear your guys' takes on them. And then here are the things that I like about directing commercials, which are, you know, pretty obvious, make money fast. But the list of things that I don't like about commercials, which is also you could think about as a list of the differences between commercial directing and narrative directing. And I thought we can go through those things and maybe turn some people off of commercial directing and turn other people on. Does that
Let's do
work
it
for you guys?
Let's do it. Oren, take it away. What you got first?
Okay, so we're going to start with the myths, because I think, you know, a lot of people think that that commercials are some way for them to make money while they're working like on their feature script or on their TV show. They move to LA, they know how to edit, they know how to direct, they know how to work with actors, they went to film school. I'm actually curious from Matt, your point of view, especially going to like USC film school, like if there's a lot of people coming out of film school that thought like, oh, well, on the side, I'll do commercials just to make money, but you know, I have my passion projects.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, for the record, I would put all three of us in the category that you were describing, Oren, even though I know this is the myth part, but we're all working on our own stuff on the side, right? Like Carlyn's like, you know, working pretty actively, but I think maybe the thing that you're really getting at is that breaking into commercials and the amount of time we spend working on commercials is similar to basically having a day job. You know, like it's a lot of unpaid hours and commitment and interest that it takes to get in there. So, but to answer your question, I was a snob, surprise, surprise. So I didn't really think about commercials. I thought about music videos a lot because especially at the time, that was a thing that was very trendy. You know, you looked at Spike Jonze or David Fincher or Michel Gondry, those guys who were all making the best features at the time. And it was like, oh, well, they got their start in music videos. I want to do that too. And that's kind of how I developed my interest in commercials, is because I started interning at places, because most, especially at the time, but even still, commercials and music videos kind of, just because they're both short form, get lumped into, you know, if you're a stylish young director, that's a good place to get started. And music videos are in a certain sense easier to break into because the budgets are drastically smaller, especially if you're interested in like independent music or whatever.
Yeah, and you actually could you could make a good spec music video on your own.
Yeah, I mean, if you have like a gimmick or an idea or a take, or you're friends with a band, basically, is kind of how I think typically things would start.
Right.
Hopefully that band is famous, but even if not, it wasn't that big a deal, you know.
And what about you, Carlyn? Were you like, did you ever have that attitude that commercials are like the easy money-making thing that nobody wants to do, so you'll do it to make some money while you're competing, you know, for the stuff that everyone wants to sink their teeth in?
Yeah, I think commercials, especially when you're younger or even younger, not even an age sense, but a career sense, you have greener, thank you. You have this sense of, how hard can it be? I could do that. I've done shorts, I've done whatever. Like this has to be like, I don't see why I can't get hired to make like a shitty phone commercial or whatever. You know, it just seems like it seems easy.
Yeah, exactly. And with that attitude,
it's not.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
I, you know, honestly, actually, I heard a lot. I remember hearing actors say that, like, oh, I'll do commercials and TV to make money while I aspire to be a movie star. That was the thing that I heard all the time. Carlyn's nodding her head. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And I guess my point is that the myth is that commercials are somehow easier to get into than film or TV. Yes, there's a lot of branded content. There's a lot of low budget stuff. But if you want to play in the big leagues in the same way that you want to do it in commercial, in film and TV, if you want to make a Netflix film or you want to make a TV show that's even like on a cable network that no one really watches, making a commercial, $1 million commercial, or even like a $500,000 commercial is as competitive as getting those things. So it's not like an easy stepping stone. It can be a stepping stone, but that's the first myth I wanted to say, to dispel.
I have a question, actually. I remember at the time people saying if you do want to get into commercials, that you should do PSAs, and that PSAs were a way to kind of do a national spot for a cause, and like maybe you wouldn't get any money, or maybe they'd give you a little bit of money or whatever. But like when you're in that kind of film school, let's put on a show sort of zone of like, oh, all of our friends are just kind of helping each other out, and I'm going to spec one thing for one person and they're going to help me spec another, that PSAs were a thing. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah, I think I have heard that. I've personally never gotten a PSA. Have y'all?
No. I wonder.
So here are 3 working commercial directors. None of us have done a PSA.
Well, that's speaking of myths, though, right? Like it was like, oh, well, that's the way that you break in. That that's the music video of indie bands to music videos are PSAs to commercials. Is basically the
right. But also, I think new directors think that it's all about money. Like, hey, I'll do it for free. I'll do it for cheap. So people will want to hire me because I'm cheap. But really, it has so little to do with how much you're getting paid, and so much to do with how you can convince people to trust you with their brand, even if it's a PSA, In
a certain league, people want to spend more money on a director, or at least they want that director to be expensive, even if they feel like they're getting them for a deal.
Sure.
Yeah, I think maybe this is jumping ahead too much, but I think in my narrative experience, I think I've talked about like this Netflix movie that I'm writing, and the script that they read that I got the job for. It's like sort of in the same ballpark, but it's not an exact comp of what I got hired to write. But in commercials, that's not, you have to have directed something so similar, and I'm sure we're going to get there. But it's just, they just give, like, I think that's another myth, is that you're like, well, I've done a comedy thing. Like, why can't I do a comedy commercial? And you're like, woof, if you only knew the buckets of comedy that you have to be in, to even be one of the hundreds of reels submitted to be up for a job. Yeah.
It's tough. And we will kind of talk about reels in a second.
Okay. Your favorite topic. I love it.
Yeah. Well, not this type of reel is not my favorite topic, but yes.
Okay.
So I just had 2 other myths I wrote. The first one was that you can make a spec commercial and then sell it to the company that you made the spec of. Like that's literally happened like 3 times in the history of filmmaking.
Wow. People think that? I didn't know that.
Yes, all the time. People are like, well, I made this like pretty awesome spec commercial. It's for this small company. They make or it'll be like Warby Parker or something. Like, oh, it's Warby Parker. It's a new company. Not that many people know them. And you're like, first of all, everybody knows them. And second of all, just because you haven't seen a TV commercial for them doesn't mean that they want TV commercials,
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, Oren, because I hear that. I love that. And it is fun to talk about the success stories every once in a while of like someone who makes an iPhone commercial at home and it becomes an actual phenomenon. But have you ever heard of people reaching out to brands that they love to do spec work for them?
Yeah, I've heard of people talking about that. I mean, I've especially through this podcast, I just talked to a lot of directors, and I've definitely heard people say like, hey, I made this commercial, or I have this great concept for this brand, mm-hmm. not even a Nike, for like, I love this these Calphalon pans, I can make a commercial for them. Like maybe I'll reach out, maybe they'll put it on their website or whatever. And it's like, it just never happens. Mm-hmm. Like it's all about that trust, especially if you have a brand worth anything. Well,
let's dissect that a little bit more. Why don't brands want free commercials, let's say?
Well, because there's a whole marketing department. They have strategies. They have a brand that they want to protect. A lot of times they have agencies that they go through. And who are you to come tell like an entire team of marketing people that you know how to sell their stuff better than they do.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, there's a couple things. One, there's gatekeepers. There's people whose jobs are to make commercials and pitch commercials and come up with great ideas. So they're going to be mad, right? Whether the idea is good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's like it feels like a personal affront to them. Let's presume that's the situation. But the other thing that's really important is that you don't know what messaging is important to the brand in that moment, right? So, every quarter there's a new combination of rice, beans, cheese, guacamole, and sour cream, and a tortilla at Taco Bell. It's always the same thing mixed up somehow, right? And I guess ground beef or whatever. But you don't know what it's called. You don't know what's exciting about it, and you don't know what's down further down the pipeline, right? So even though even if you're the biggest Taco Bell fan ever, you can't pitch a 7-layer burrito. You can tell I'm a vegetarian. I'm only naming vegetarian items at Taco Bell. But you can't pitch an old product.
Fact, I've actually never eaten at Taco Bell.
Lucky you.
That's the best dog meat in town.
But my point is that all of these companies have mandates and messaging that you're probably not privy to because that advertisement is being made currently, and that's for 2 quarters from now, or at least next quarter, right? And so the likelihood that specifically what they're trying to highlight in their brand or what product they're trying to promote, the likelihood that lines up with what you made spec-wise is pretty unlikely, right?
I have a story about this.
Please hit me. Yeah.
Well, it's about a music video, but I feel like music videos are kind of like advertisements for bands.
Mm-hmm.
And this artist, I'm just going to out him, but this artist named Shaky Graves, you heard of him?
Mm-hmm.
He's a friend of mine, and he was in a bunch of my shorts when I lived in Austin, and we were friends, and he was kind of like taking off at the time. Like he was, Shaky Graves was like becoming a thing. And so I wanted to direct a music video. And so I did it out of pocket, and I like sort of told him my ideas, but I didn't really collaborate with him. I just thought he would trust me. And he saw the music video and he was like, no, I'm not releasing this.
I've had unreleased music videos. Same thing. Yeah.
I was devastated.
Yeah.
And I was like,
and that's not even a big company. Yeah. But it's still a brand.
It's still a brand. And I was so hurt that he didn't want to put this out. But looking back on it, I'm like, I should have collaborated with him because same thing with brands, right? Like if they're not invested in the work, then the likelihood of them putting it out under their name is highly unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally a tangent, but if you guys saw the VMAs recently, I think 4 of the 5 music videos that were nominated for Best Video of the Year were directed by the artist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's how little trust it is to get to, even for these people that are not directors, to let somebody else direct their music videos. And these are the biggest people in the world, like the Beyoncés that could, hire any single director in the world, but they're directing their own music videos, or even Taylor Swift, because they want to control the brand. And then like on the commercial side, I'm working on this Amazon project right now, and they had like this 96-page brand guide for this product. And it's literally like how the logo, like you should never use the graphic of the logo without the text. You should never outline the logo. You should never, arrange it in the middle of the screen. It should always be in a corner. Like all those things, like Matt is saying, you have absolutely no idea. And they'll be down to the wardrobe. Like, no, they don't like graphic tees. And, for this product I'm working on, they're just so specific. They don't want people too emotional. It's kind of a video game thing. They don't want to imply that they're competing with Xbox or PlayStation. It's like so hyper specific what they're targeting. And like Matt says, if you are just like, hey, I got this cool idea for this thing I saw on TikTok, I think it would be good for your, Canon printer or whatever, then they're going to say, they're actually never going to respond to you because they're probably not even legally allowed to listen to your idea.
That being said, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't spec it. If it's like a legitimately funny or cool or stylish or emotional idea and you do really love that product or that brand, that's a cool spec. And all of the creative directors and agency people out there are going to see that spec and they're going to be so jealous because they are like, oh, I wish I could do that, but I know I'm not allowed to put the brand anywhere but up in the corner or whatever weird rules they have, right? Like if you're unencumbered by all of the trappings of a brand mandate, that means that you maybe have a better shot at making something legitimately cool, and that can help you get the next job.
Right. Well, this leads me to my third myth, which is, and this one's probably more up for debate, but don't take your short films or your features or your music videos and try to recut them into spec commercials. I mean, you can, and maybe it'll work for like a perfume commercial or something that like is so...
I wish you could see the shock on Carlyn's face right now.
Well, because all these
Audience.
things, like a commercial
I know I have a lot
built,
to say about this.
A commercial is built in a certain way. Like you see all these people like, yeah, I made all these spec commercials. I'm like, really? That's a spec commercial? They're like, yeah, well, I took this short that I shot about a relationship, but now it's about, a commercial for milk or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, it's interesting because you don't mention milk till the end card. And 99% of commercials mention the product like up front, or at least show you the problem they're trying to solve up front. And sure, there's a Super Bowl commercial where it's, like Jason Momoa walking around doing silly things and you don't know what it's for till the end. But most commercials are trying to grab your attention and get the name of their product out up front. So if you're this unknown director that has beautiful footage that is very, very, very loosely tied to some brand, like it will feel like you recut your stuff. And so
but here's my, I would disagree. I don't totally disagree in terms of cutting down your stuff to be spec commercials, but cutting down your stuff into 30s that gets the joke across or the story across or
cutting
the
like
emotion
a 2-minute
across.
like branded content thing into a 30-second spot, basically.
Yeah, I think that has been useful for me personally.
Yes,
because
yes.
And I think for all three of us, frankly, right?
Yeah.
Like
That's
coming from the
down.
world of branded content, that's definitely.
No, even one of my college humor sketches, this like it's called The Genius Behind. It's like a masterclass parody about a guy who draws the boobs on cartoon characters. It's very stupid, but we cut it down to 30 seconds, and agencies fucking love it. Like they,
right? But is there? Do you
it.
put like a brand on the end of it?
No, I guess it's kind of for. I mean, it's like a masterclass parody, so it's like masterclass branding is throughout, but no, it's not like a spec commercial.
I use a similar college humor sketch about fancy restaurants, and it's not at all
right.
Yeah.
So that is a good sketch. Having a good short on your reel is not bad. I don't think like this short played at Sundance or having this really great sketch or this super funny thing.
But cut to 30 seconds.
Video.
Cut to 30 seconds.
Yeah,
which I think is an important thing.
Because that's the problem too. Is like,
but don't try to say it's a commercial.
No, you don't need to do that. But I do think
Yeah.
Don't put a Nike logo at the end of your cool sports film.
Especially not something like Nike because they have such specific branding. Like it could never. How could you possibly hit that?
Right.
Go ahead.
Right.
Man who draws boobs on cartoon characters. Just
more of a loose
Nike.
brand.
Yeah.
There we go.
That being said, if you did have a short film about someone who is very thirsty or something, and then threw a got milk at the end. My references are from 1996 right now, I guess. But, like there is a world where it would work. I guess my point is if you have a problem that's solved by a brand cleanly in 30 seconds in a short film, I think that is permissible. But to Oren's point, every spot has either the branding right up top, literally the first or second sentence, within 10 seconds, basically, for YouTube pre-roll purposes, or the problem is so explicitly tied to the product that you can't help but already kind of think or be surprised in some way by the product as a result of the payoff, basically. So if you have a short film that is that specific, if it's like someone who's super horny and they need condoms or something like really truly on the nose, then I think it could work, especially if it looks great. But for the most part, basically what you're saying, Oren, is if you're kidding yourself, we all know you're kidding yourself. Don't waste anybody's time. It'd be worse to put something bad that doesn't fit and feels ham-fisted than it is to just show your very best work and hope for the best.
Yeah, or if your reel is made up of 3 30-second spots, and they're all kind of like funny stories with a brand at the end, then it's obvious that you didn't do 3 different commercials. Because having a commercial that's 27 seconds of content with a 3-second brand at the end that was not mentioned at all up until now is not a common thing. it's it's something that people do to recut their footage into a commercial.
Someone's real pissed off Oren. He is not happy about this.
No, I'm fine with it. I'm just like
I just think it's bad. Just like it's
no.
not going to get you hired.
Send me some example. I mean, I'm not obviously. I don't need you to go search for things, but I think that a lot of people that are trying to make spec commercials don't think like marketing people and like advertising people, and it shows in their specs. And in a perfect spec, people don't know if it's a real commercial or not.
Here is the overall theme of this episode from Oren Carlyn.
Yes,
you have to take it seriously if you want to play in the big leagues. You have to be analytical. You have to be smart. You have to be tactical. That's really all you're trying to say. Yeah,
and also you have to love commercials. And so it's like the people I love the way Carlyn said it earlier. It's like, oh yeah, I'll just do these shitty commercials until I get a job, because who wants to do commercials? Commercials suck, right? High five. Like, everyone knows commercials suck. Like, those people don't become commercial directors. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to kind of like commercials and appreciate them and watch them and study them, and then you can make a good spec. But if you just have an idea for a funny sketch and you put a brand at the end, then I don't know how much work that leads to, unless it's the funniest thing of all time, and it has a celebrity in it. Okay, cool. So, any other myths you guys want to throw in there, or should I get to my list of pros? We'll probably get to a lot of things.
Well, I don't know if this is a myth per se, but I told y'all that I just taught a commercial class to a women's film group, and something that tended to resonate with them is I was like, if you do it all, if you're think you're going to be a commercial director who does it all, you're not going to book any jobs.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You can't be the writer, director, DP, producer, editor.
Or even like when I started out directing commercials and branded stuff, I did a lot of documentary and lifestyle stuff.
Oh, I see.
And I had comedy stuff. And you can't use both. I couldn't put some docu stuff and some comedy stuff on a reel to get a job. Like, they're two totally separate tracks. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I don't know. There might be this myth that you have a great documentary short and then you have a great comedy short, and those two things together will get you a job, and they won't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
right.
True.
The myth is that variety and range have value.
They don't. It has no value.
Carlyn, do you know I have a secret animal reel?
Yes, because you did that sick Russian cat job. I'm so jealous.
Yeah. I had that and a handful of other animal related spots. So it's not the cool jobs that I am, posting about a ton, or they're not on my rep's website and stuff, but they do all know, if an animal job comes across their radar, that they do put together a reel.
Sloth.
I have done a sloth. I've directed a sloth. I've directed a cat.
Wow. All I want to do is direct cats.
A bunch of dog stuff.
Cats are harder than dogs. I'll say that for sure. You can train a puppy.
Well, obviously, but I enjoy a challenge.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, if you want to shoot some puppy specs, I know someone with a very agile dog.
Yes.
Questionably agile. Yeah. Look, she's mainly good at her agility training. Tonight she was bad.
Okay, let's get into the pros. So honestly, at first, I started with my cons list, because I just have a lot of complaints, because I like to complain. It's like a Jewish thing, I think. But then I was like, actually, there's a lot of pros. So these are some reasons I like directing commercials. Number one is you tend to make a pretty good amount of money from directing a commercial relative to how much time you spend. So I'd say probably a mid-level director like us makes somewhere between $5,000 to $15,000 per shoot day. So if you have a 2-day shoot, you could make $10,000, you could make $30,000, somewhere in that, right? And obviously that payment all includes the prep you've done, but the prep tends to be short, 2 weeks, maybe a week or 2 weeks. And post,
sometimes it's 3 days.
Sometimes it's 3 days. And then post, you can, in America, usually can be involved as, you can try to stay as involved as you can, but you could also say, sorry, I have another job, and take off and not really do much at all in post if you really don't care about it.
Honestly, you're lucky if you get more than one round. I feel like I get to do a good fine cut that I'm feeling excited about, and then I get sent the finals, and maybe I get to be around for color, maybe.
Right. And then there's kind of this...
Yeah, I've been cut out of post a lot lately, but that's a different con.
Yeah, that's what editors do. And then, and kind of the general rule is like somewhere between 5 to 10% of the production budget is what goes to the director. So you do a $100,000 commercial, you would get like $5,000 to $10,000. You do $1 million commercial, you get like $50,000 to $100,000. And now if you're famous, it's a whole different ballpark. If you do hire a David Fincher, Michel Gondry, Ava DuVernay, Scorsese, whatever, to do a commercial, they are paid as if a celebrity gets paid to be in the commercial, which is a totally different way to calculate money, I think. So that's my first thing I like. The second thing, after coming from years and years of trying to get people to watch my sketch videos and my YouTube videos, my web shows, my whatever pitches, everything, you do not need to worry about getting distribution or viewers on commercial work. Literally, people spend money to show people your work. This is true in narrative also, but like in commercials, it's very true that like the more you work, the more you work. If you are shooting commercials, other people will hire you to shoot commercials. In a straighter path than like if you sold a TV show pilot script, the odds of that leading you to sell another script are not that much higher unless your script gets made and then shot and liked and you get a season and it, right? Like, sure, you can say, like, oh, this person has a deal here and has a deal here. But at least for me, I'm constantly like, oh, by the way, I just finished this commercial. I'm sending them out to people and they use them to get me more jobs.
Yeah.
That's true.
Pretty consistently in a different way than, like, I think you could do with a feature script.
Right. And I'm sure you're going to get to this, Oren, but the turnaround, right, being able to really rapidly, post about and brag about and, Instagram about, like, all of this work, helps fuel that fire. Basically, you're getting people's attention regularly in a way that like a feature, it's like, okay, well, I'll see you guys in 2 years, hopefully.
Exactly. You don't need to commit too much time to each project, right? It's like a month on a commercial. You also get to try out a bunch of new things. Like on this commercial, we're going to do these cool Steadicam shots. Now we're going to get a techno crane. Here, I'm going to get to work with these interesting actors, the Blue Man Group, whatever. Now I'm going to do like a horror comedy thing. And today I'm going to do a stunt comedy thing, And today it's just going to be like a cool visual effect. So you get to kind of, you get to try something and you get to focus. Like this 30-second commercial is about this one joke or this one visual effect or this one gag where everything explodes, or we're going to build this great prop. And so compared to narrative stuff, there's just, it's fun because you get to go through a lot of things and do different things. And my final pro is you do kind of get wined and dined in a way that, especially, not during COVID, that doesn't quite happen like in indie film,
Yeah, I think it's sort of delayed too. Do you know what I mean? I think like, having just gotten back from a film festival where I felt wined and dined, relatively speaking, it's just, it just took 1.5 years basically before you get any of that. But you get depending on how many festivals you decide to go to and play, like you do still get that. But I think it's about the cadence, right? Like the paycheck is more regular, the rate at which you're doing it is more regular, and the whining and dining is more regular.
Yeah, I mean it's corporate sponsored. Meals.
And also, a lot of these clients and agency people and stuff, like this is like the big event of their year, and like they have corporate accounts and stuff. Carlyn's eyes are getting larger and glazing over. I used to hate that part, and have come to like it much more actually, because I used to not understand that these are our coworkers. These people are our friends as well, or they can be your friends if you like develop relationships with them, and that can be meaningful and valuable and creative also. I guess I just didn't understand that agency people can be awesome for kind of a long time. It took me a long time to realize, because they were always like, they would be the person who would come over and be like, can you make sure that they, enunciate the brand a little bit more, or smile when they say it, or whatever dumb note they've got. But it's because they've been through the trenches a little bit more, and the more you work, the more you realize that that job is hard, and they know that it can be a little annoying what they're doing as well.
Yeah, they know that I'm annoyed. They can see my face.
Know.
Yeah, they know.
Okay,
yeah.
Yes, we will do that. But take where she doesn't do anything interesting. Your request.
So the TV still looks too small. I don't know how that's possible. Okay, we'll change yet another lens and see what happens. What was I going to say? Can I add some more?
Yes,
pros?
So those are all my pros. There's no other reasons I like.
There's tons of more reasons.
So many reasons. Yeah.
So many reasons. I would say lately what I've really appreciated with commercials is practicing pitching, because I don't think we realize how invaluable that is. Like, I remember getting on my first call, the initial calls with the agency and being kind of nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And now it just feels like, here we go again. It just becomes so much easier. And I know, like, when I'm pitching to write various features and TV shows and blah, 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 I'm so much better at pitching than many, many, many writers, because we just do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And also your skills in terms of the assets that you want to bring, you learn more about yourself because through that practice. You learn, like, I really love visual aids, or I love to put together, or I love to just script everything out, or whatever it is. You just learn more about that, and you also sharpen those skills more. So if you know that you like visual aids, you get better and better and better at crafting them.
We had an agency producer on last week, Alex. I just worked with her, and she's like, "Yeah, we really liked how you made that test video, and you showed it to us." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I should make more test videos."
You make a ton of test videos. I feel like that's like your whole steez. I feel like such a slacker compared to
you. I guess maybe my bigger realization was, like, stop killing myself on the treatments, just make test videos.
That's not bad, actually. That's right, because everybody's got an awesome treatment. Make an awesome treatment, but, like, don't worry about making the most awesome, but plus it in another direction. That's interesting.
And to Carlyn's point, like, you write a TV pilot and you get 5 meetings, you go and you see how the first meeting goes, and then the second meeting you fix a couple things. The third one is the big one, or whatever.
They're probably all on the same day. You don't even have time to process,
Yeah, but with commercials, you're pitching on 50 commercials, or maybe not 50, like 20 commercials a year. You're getting to get better and better and better. And I feel like I'm in a really comfortable place. Like, I'm so comfortable that I can, on the pitch, say, "Look, I don't really understand this, but this is how I'm approaching it. What do you guys think about this?" Like, you start understanding how they're working, and you're talking their language, and and that all just comes from being able to learn faster. It's like, when the Canon 5D came out, or these DSLRs, before that, you'd take photos with film. You'd have to, like, set your exposure and your shutter speed and all this stuff, and then you'd wait like 3 days to see if you got it right. And as soon as these cameras came out, where they're digital and you can see the results right away, all these amazing photographers came out of nowhere, because you can learn like 100 times as fast. And that's kind of like, I think, Carlyn, what you're saying with commercials is, like, just get so much practice seeing how different people operate and react. And maybe your skin gets a little thicker too, because, maybe 5 people look bored, but they actually love you at the end.
And inevitably, the more that you pitch on, you won't get all, you can have a good batting average, but you're not going to get every single one. And I even have, like, a sense of humor now about the stuff I don't get. I think, Oren, you know this, but I was pitching on this Pizza Hut commercial earlier this year that I knew I was, like, absolutely not going to get. So I just fucking went for it, and I pitched this crazy idea. They didn't hire me, but it was like, oh, well, I'm just, like, moving on, and, like, I saw the commercial and I was like, yeah, that's not what I pitched. That's very different. But, like, it was fun for me to pitch on it, to be like, fuck it, I'm just going to, like, see what happens, Whereas when I was starting out, I just was so desperate to win every job. But now, when you book enough jobs, you kind of just you're more relaxed about it. And that's, like, one of the pros of working in this field.
Matt, you got any other pros?
I got a pro. Yeah. The toys, right? Like the ability to just, like, ask for an expensive thing for 1 shot, 2 shots isn't out of the ordinary, because there's not that many shots that we're talking about, right? Like, if you were like, hey, I really need a Technocrane for 1 shot that's kind of just in the middle of my feature, it's probably not going to make a ton of sense. But, because of the scale and the speed and all of that, you just get more toys earlier in your career, I would say. It's not a coincidence that, like, plenty of indie features are shot with the exact same budget that we shoot commercials at. And so
you're right.
Yeah, all the time.
I knew that, but I was like, fuck.
You're like, fuck. Yeah. Not only that, guys, I know all of us have complained about the size of budgets for like that we would have shot something like a feature ourselves and been happy with. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we're rolling our eyes at like
I know
$300,000, $400,000.
But once we go through our list of cons, it'll be very clear why we're rolling our eyes.
Yeah.
And yes,
but the toys are, and also one final pro, kind of going off the indie feature thing. It's special to be able to take the time to get every single frame of 30 seconds as perfect as you possibly can. That's a sort of practice that you don't often get to do in narrative, right? Especially when you're making a web series or a short film or even those first couple features, you're going to shoot 30 seconds, hour one, day one. You're going to just be cranking so hard because you're trying to make an hour in 15 days, 16 days or whatever. So like the ability to just make 30 seconds perfect rather than like
you get in the grade, you can work on each shot for like 15 minutes.
Easy.
Never do
easy. Yeah. All of that stuff. You're going to have conversations about what's going to be in the background. Let's really dig in on this cast. All of that stuff. You just get to kind of really learn what's important to your own art as it applies elsewhere, but like in a really contained and supported way. So it's another version of having lots of toys. You just have more support to really kind of dig in and push yourself to be as perfect as you possibly can in crafting these images.
Cool. And Carlyn, do you have one last pro?
Boy, I'm really on this practice kick, but just quickly on the practice front, I do think I haven't directed TV yet, but I have developed feature with a studio, and I think the politics on set of a commercial, like working with the agency and the client, has been really great training for me in terms of like how to choose my battles, because you just can't choose them all. And so that's been really great practice.
And also to read power structure. No, I love this, Carlyn, so much, but you also can see like power structures, right? Like you realize that, some people are on my side, but not everyone, or some people disagree. There's infighting amongst them. There's a whole other, just like a studio, there's a whole other group of people who've had a history that you're kind of you're just dropping into. And the better that you can understand that and like read any signals or cues and like who you align yourself with, all of that, those politics of it are really important as well.
For sure.
I had one more quick thing. Okay, I think hiring your friends is really great too, because then, everyone loves money, everyone loves to work, but also if you build a community through doing commercials, they'll often help you on your own projects.
100%.
So there's that.
Yes, that is a really good one.
Yeah, that's great.
Oren is ready to get to the con, so let's do it. Let's get there.
Because that's where the majority of this conversation is going to be. But so I split up the cons into 4 categories, and
Volume 1.
Those categories are getting jobs, prepping jobs, production, and post. And maybe we'll go one section at a time, and I'll tell you my list. And we could literally do an episode on each thing on my list, but I'm just going to fly through them.
And you will, but continue.
So cons. Okay, so getting jobs, right? This is getting commercial jobs. We've already done an entire episode on how it works with agencies and shortlists and sales reps and all that stuff. You can listen to it if you want to know the mechanics of it. But once you get the opportunity to pitch on a commercial, you have to write a treatment. Oftentimes, you'll spend between 2 days to a week on it. It will be somewhere between 5 to 50 pages. It will have all the best graphics, the best ideas you've ever had. Music, maybe you'll edit things, you'll talk to people, you'll scout stuff, you'll do all this insane amount of work. And a high number of times they'll be like, actually, they're just going to hire the same person that did it last year. Like you do so much work for free where you're like finding a way to fall in love with the idea that you're not paid for, which is devastating. And then you can't really use it for anything else, especially because you're pitching on the agency's idea. The second thing is the chaos of reels, of trying to constantly being judged by, your 3 commercials and how similar not only how similar are they to the thing that you're trying to get the job for, but they also have to be good at the same time. And if you have 2 great commercials and one kind of bad commercial, but it has like a sloth in it and you put it on there because they mentioned a sloth, they'll be like, oh, well, the sloth spot sucks and we're never going to hire Enla. Or, Like,
I do wish that sloth one was a little tighter. I do wish it was better.
Oh, it's the sloth.
I haven't seen
it.
A little I want to see it.
It's a little slow.
And then just from the money standpoint, it's a race to the bottom. You know, you are teamed up with a production company that is bidding on this commercial, and they tell you, hey, we want a 3-day shoot in Laughlin, Nevada, and we have $160,000 for it. And so now this production company is like, okay, we got to hit $160,000. You can't have this, and you can't have that, and you can't have this.
I want to push back a tiny bit on that. A
Sure.
producer once said to me about his production company that you need to know what weight class you're in, right? He was like, look, I know they're going out to a Ferrari and a Mercedes, and I know I'm the Honda Accord, right? But I think that
the most reliable, dependent,
sure,
long-lasting car.
Right, but we're talking about how expensive they are, right? And so I think that sometimes it feels like we're in a race to the bottom because I think budgets are certainly shrinking, but I think that sometimes, you know, agencies are going to different production companies so that they can see like, okay, this is what the premium bid looks like. This is maybe the director that we really, really want. But maybe I don't have enough money to do that. And so I think there's a little bit of calculus that they're doing on their side as well. And so sometimes the onus is on the production company to know really where they are in that ranking. Because, you know, sometimes the job is come in exactly on budget. Sometimes the job is come in the lowest, and that's how you're going to be competitive. And you just have to know where you are in the ecosystem.
Sure, that's definitely true. But I guess there's also just this thing where they'll be like, oh, can you add a second day where you shoot this thing? Or it'll be a half day. Can you do this? They just can keep asking you for things. And
Carlyn, this is
in general, you will say
that
yes.
I've heard. Oren's just been beaten down by adding GIFs and social pieces. This is the moment where you know you're getting piled on. Yeah, and you're not wrong, Oren. I know I give you a hard time about this on the show and personally as well. But like that sometimes that just boils down to like who's doing what and what you can push back on. Do you know what I mean? Carlyn, do you agree?
Right.
Like but my point being like sometimes a producer has to say no. And depending on which producer you're working with.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the time when you're trying to get the job, the instinct is to say like, yeah, we can figure out a way to do that. You know, it's not reality. It's like, what should we say to get this job? Because we've already done all this work to try to get the job.
I understand where you're coming from on that. And my instinct would be to do that as well sometimes. But I have observed my favorite producers push back and say, listen, we want to do a really good job. And so we know what's possible. And we have the track record to prove that we know what's possible. And that's why we're talking. So if you want to add that, this is what it's going to cost. And I've segmented it out into the budget. So like, if that's really important to you, we can go ahead and add it. Not a big deal, but this is what it costs. And like being really crystal clear with that, I think sometimes is maybe the way to go. I'm not trying to put down the people that you're working with, Oren, or I guess I'm saying like sometimes it's about setting the table and setting boundaries is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but sure. I guess I think
we don't often have the power to do that is maybe your point.
We don't have the power. Yeah, I'm mainly talking about us as directors. Mm-hmm. And when they say, hey, good news, we got another $15,000 for you to shoot this extra 15-second bumper in the day, you're like, who the fuck cares? I don't have more time just because you got me another, like, actually this job I'm working on right now, they're like, hey, we're going to pay you a little more. We know it's harder than we thought. And I'm like, thank you. I really appreciate that. It doesn't help us squeeze more minutes into the day that we don't have, you know? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And the producers, like, it is this weird thing. There's this thing I've always like, with union and non-union stuff, I've always been like, why are we shooting non-union, you know? Mm-hmm. Like we should shoot union. And everyone's like, well, they want us to hit this number on the budget and you can't afford to pay the fringes on this number. So it's like, then if we just said no to those jobs, then we would just never work.
Carlyn, I want to hear your thoughts on this, Carlyn, because Oren and I have had this conversation 1,000 times.
You know, I mean, the production company I'm working with now, I'm not even like that privy to these conversations. I think they just kind of shield me from it. So like if I put something in my treatment that's like, oh, that's not in the budget, then that's a conversation. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, I'm not really that concerned about it until I win the job.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is the thing. You're in this weird mode where you're just kind of promising things.
Yeah.
And I know, Carlyn, your last job, they wanted you to shoot a ton of stuff, and they gave you the talent for like 15 minutes.
And they were 4 hours late, and we only had them for 6 hours.
Yeah, so that's the stuff. But
I know it was a fucking nightmare.
But in the pitching phase,
so
4 hours late for 6 hours.
We're promising the world.
What? Yeah. But sorry, not to get off on a tangent.
No, we can. I'm happy to talk about it.
4 hours late, but they weren't like, oh, don't worry, we'll be good. We'll give you the full 6. They were just 4 hours late.
They did say that. No, they said we'll give you the full 6, so that was good. But if we started at 8 a.m.,
the crew had already been there.
Yeah.
We started at 8 a.m. We were in a place where they were working in 10 hours schedules.
Mm-hmm.
So the talent was supposed to get there at noon. They got there at 4. And they brought 10 people with them.
Have you seen this Instagram feed, IA Stories? I want you to read it real quick, buddy.
It was, and the client just made it so much worse. It was just like, if that was at least the actor or whatever you want to call that person being 4 hours late was the least of my problems. That was the least of my problems. Right.
Well, let's jump into this. I only have two other cons about getting jobs. Another one is that a lot of times the concepts you're given are kind of derivative of things that some creative director or copywriter saw on TikTok or saw. So a lot of times your marketing materials are like derivative, and because you're trying to get the job, you have to like tell them that you love them and try to put your own spin and plus them. But it's hard to be revolutionary in this process of advertising. Or even like artistic,
And those are the jobs I win always. I'm like, what?
Yeah, we've all done that.
I love it so much
because they just want to. It's because that thing where they want to see that it's worked before, so now they'll do it because it worked before.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, which is kind of something that it took me a couple of years to learn, but it's a big thing, and it's really related to what Matt and I are like debating about, is that you want to get the job for you, and sometimes you're like, actually, I don't really like this creative, or I don't really like this budget, or this isn't super convenient for me. But if you don't get that job, there's an entire production company behind you that also doesn't get the job. So you fighting to get the job, even if it's not like your favorite job, it's like you're supporting a company. And so it's an extra onus on you. It's not like if you're pitching to get a directing gig on a TV show, you don't get it, some other director will get it. Same company will produce
it.
My
reps still don't get paid then if I don't book jobs.
Right.
It's slightly different. But,
it's not that different though, Carlyn. I think I hear you, Oren, and I think that we have special relationships with a lot of the people that we work with, and we're friends and we care about each other, and we want their businesses to thrive.
And by the way, they've made a bid and they've talked to the producer and they've spent 3 weeks on this as well.
I think that taking a step back, the business model for them can't be everything's on Oren or the lights get unplugged. Like, that's not a good business model. And so I appreciate that you feel the pressure, but in the same way that, Carlyn, if CAA is like, oh, Carlyn, sorry, we didn't make your movie, they are not like, okay, well, I guess the lease is up tomorrow. Like, that's crazy talk, right? And on smaller scale things and smaller companies, sometimes it feels that way. Like, if their whole plan is
be nice to yourself.
Yeah, if they're literally all their chips are on Oren winning this job, then they're not good business people.
Next category of challenges I find in commercial directing, and this is in prepping jobs. So first of all, Matt already brought this up, but the hierarchy. As a director, up until now, they've treated you like the god of directing. We love your vision. We love your ideas. We love everything. We're going to go with you. This is between when you get the job and when you start prepping. But as soon as you start prepping, you realize how low on the totem pole you are.
Can I tell a quick story?
Sure.
A lady at a very large agency, I booked the job, and she says to me, she has like a French accent. She's like, "What is this? It is meaningless. Nothing is good. It doesn't mean anything. Why'd you do that?" She's like, "Why this?" And I'm like, you hired me. This is an insane conversation to be having. But I was like, wow.
This is about what? Like your storyboards or what?
Yeah, my treatment. I guess they went back over my treatment and they were like, what does all this mean?
This is after you got the job.
Yes, and I'm like, I mean,
to be
means
fair,
like
she's
it's
probably
a commercial.
got a little bit of a point, like,
it is meaningless. That's the point of commercials, right?
You're gonna keep the camera active? What do you mean? Come on. You're gonna enjoy
it was wild,
energy.
and I thought, and it was just a wild. And I thought, this is a good example of having thick skin because I had to keep a straight face on this Zoom while this woman was just laying into me.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
And it's that low on the totem pole sometimes.
Yeah, so you are, especially in prep when you're talking to the agency, pretty much everyone at the agency is above you. And a lot of times there's one person with like not great ideas that some people are afraid of, and they'll pitch something and you have to explore it even though it makes no sense, for your concept.
I think going back to the pros of practice, that will happen throughout your career in every other aspect as well. Like especially in like a group setting, one young executive or executive with a chip on their shoulder will bring something up and you still have to talk about it. You still have to keep a straight face, to Carlyn's point. And the better you get at kind of plussing that idea or redirecting it or even shutting it down in a positive way, the better. And that doesn't always happen, to Oren's point. They are, the agency people, they are the boss, right? Like if they push back, but like the better you can get at like deflecting that stuff, that will serve you in the future as well.
Yeah. And you might be someone that's directed 80 commercials and they've worked on, and this is their first commercial campaign, and they really like an actor from The Bachelor. And so you have to cast them, even though you could have cast, Aubrey Plaza, but now you have to use this person instead. And so the next thing is, once you realize you're on the bottom of the totem pole creatively, then almost all these places have legal departments that will come in and tell you all your great ideas don't, that's a little dangerous. That promotes violence. This feels a little risky. They're so sensitive about everything that, and to me, this is very different than like an HBO show or even like the viral video.
They've all got corporate departments.
Yes,
they've all got legal teams, and they all push back. They all push back. And the reason that Game of Thrones gets to do the shit that they do, yes, it's HBO, but it's also that track record.
Right, but you can't bring that up on a commercial. You can't be like, well, they did it on Game of Thrones. They chopped off someone's head. In commercials, they will literally be like, well, you can't say Amazon Prime. Like you have to say either Amazon or Prime. So this, and you're like, yeah, but the whole thing is a rap video on this, how this rhymes with something. They're like, yeah, just find something else, Like that. Those are the types of notes you get in commercials because the artistic integrity is also low on the totem pole compared to narrative stuff, even TV shows, even like a, ABC sitcom or whatever. There will be people high up on the, like in the hierarchy that care about the quality of the show more than a lot of things. So though you'll have Chuck Lorre pushing back against the legal department instead of like the person that's low. But in commercials, sometimes they're like, just figure it out. Yeah, legal says we can't do any of this stuff. And you're like, this is what we pitched and why we got the job. Yeah. And the reference you showed me from TikTok is this is what they do. And they're like, yeah, well, I guess we can't do that. So just figure out something else. Then the other thing, we already said commercials have crazy fast schedules generally. There's a lot of last minute changes unless you have a last minute change where you're like, ooh, I had this great idea for this line of dialogue. 9 out of 10 times they'll come back and say, sorry, the client already approved this. Do not change it. But then you'll be on set the morning of and they'll be like, hey, the client wanted us to try all these, like, to not do steady cam shots anymore, just static shots. You're like, well, the whole thing is like a oneer on the steady cam. They're like, yeah, just do the, they can change things last minute as much as they want, but you can't change anything last minute from my experience.
That is true.
And this is next con in prepping jobs is they will demand storyboards and shot lists at the most awkward times. And I don't know about you, but I always get offended. They're like, can we see your shot list? And you're like, what are you talking about? We don't even know what we're shooting yet.
It is funny. I rarely get asked for shot lists.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, maybe they don't trust your shot lists.
I get asked for shot lists.
I mean, I like to board things, But like, yeah, I don't know that people are ever like, give me your shot list. We need evidence of it or something.
Yeah. I mean, you hear all these amazing stories of, I know he's not cool, but like Roman Polanski, like going into...
I know he's canceled, and yet...
Yeah, sorry. It's just like, I think famously, Rosemary's Baby, they blocked and figured things out like on the day. The first half of the day they would block things. They'd let the actors find where they need to go, and then they'd light it at lunch, and then they'd shoot it after lunch, and you can't, in commercials, it's like they want to know every single shot and every single board and angle and everything. But when you ask them, for something, they'll be like, yeah, we don't know. It'll be either this or this, but they expect such precision from the director.
Let me ask, Oren, when are they asking for that information? Is it for the book? Is someone looking it over? Is the AD trying to figure out how long the day, like how to schedule the day? When are people asking for your shot lists? Who hurt you, Oren?
Yeah, the AD, the producer. And again, this isn't 100% I'm not just complaining about the agency. It's more the process. Mm-hmm. People very early on will ask you to give them things that you have not figured out yet.
Mm-hmm. Because like you don't have a location, you don't have a concept, you don't have actors locked. It's like you have nothing locked. And then sometimes you do. I like on this last job that I just did, we went in and 2 days early and took great photos of every single shot. And then that, within 48 hours, we'd already had 3 new scripts with completely different new locations.
New locations.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. New locations. So you're like, wow. Okay.
So this is just totally brand new. It doesn't.
And they have zero sympathy for you having done all that work. And then now you have to redo it all. They will just waste your time with abandon. Again, yes. I guess they're paying you well.
Yeah, I think they are, but I do think that this is a slight tangent, but I feel like I've been lucky to balance narrative and commercial work this year. However, when you book a commercial job, they own you. And that is something that I had to take a break from directing commercials this year because I was like, I can't juggle both because when I book a commercial, they just
at 11:30 they'll schedule a meeting for you at 11:45 with the agency and the client.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So when you book the jobs, you can expect until you shoot, until when you're the recommend till it awards, whatever, you're theirs, and you bet you can't have a life outside of that.
Yeah. That's true. I think some of it comes from it's everyone else's full-time job. So it's not unreasonable if you all work in the same office to hop on Slack and be like, hey guys, we should circle up in 15, right? Is everyone's calendars clear? Great. Awesome. I'll set it up. I think that's where it comes from, but it does create an intense amount of stress on us because we're typically juggling a few other things. We're probably writing another treatment or, trying to, squeeze in time to actually write our own things, or you're on a deadline for something or whatever. And that stuff, there is a mental weight of just being on call to tweak things all the time.
Yeah. Next hard part about prepping jobs, casting. I mean, if you've never been to a commercial casting as a director, it's just a total insane nightmare, especially in the days of Zoom. Every casting session, I feel like it's on me to talk for 4 hours straight. No one is saying anything. All you are being judged as a director. We've talked a lot about casting sessions before, but nowadays where everyone's on mute and has their cameras off and they're just watching you direct actors over and over and talk them through technical issues, it's tough. And then you have these amazing actors you find and you're so excited because you're all on the same page, and then the client decides to cast the people that are the worst actors from your audition because they like a look or something.
Yeah. The cadence of it is hard. Yeah, the rhythm.
Or what's happened lately to me is I go through rounds and rounds. This has happened on 3 commercials this year. We go through rounds of commercials and they don't even cast anyone from the cat. They just pick their own people or ask for my friends.
Oh, that's crazy.
Has that ever happened to y'all? That's happened 3 times this year, and it's just breaks my heart for the actors.
No, but I will say this: I'm calling back way more people because a self-tape isn't super helpful, and so sessions are much longer. What used to be an hour and a half is now 3 or 4 hours, and that is brutal.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to cast the whole family, or you're doing 4 commercials and you're casting all these different things, and you got to cast 12 people in a day.
when I texted you, Oren, and I was like, I had to watch like 200 tapes in a day.
Tapes?
Yeah, because I had twins. Yeah, that's the thing I posted today. It was like had twins in it, but they wanted to see twins for each part plus normal people for each part. So it like quadruple, and that was only one of 3 spots. So it was just kind of like, this is so crazy, you know. And they're just like, yeah, you can do it. You can watch 300 tapes by tonight at 7 p.m. And you're like, okay.
Well, the truth is, they just don't expect you to watch all of it. You know.
I know, but.
And that's I watch. Yeah. I mean, I watch at least the beginning of every one.
Yeah.
And usually when I get to like 200, I'm like, no, this person will never get it.
Yeah.
I'll skip past the awkward like zoom out full body shot. I'm like, can we put this at the end? This is like so ridiculous. Yeah. Why are we doing that?
You can ask for that, you know.
Yeah. And by the way, commercials, very often there's no dialogue for this audition, and then you have 15 people from the agency and client production company watching you try to direct someone to smile, you know, in 14 different ways. And it's just weird. And it's difficult. And I love actors. So I think, you know, and I get used to finding the beats of the commercial in auditions, that there's value to them, but they are so draining physically and emotionally. And like you guys said, half the time they don't pick the person you want to cast. And so it's like so much work to not get something. But as the director, they really want your opinion. Mm-hmm. But then the client doesn't hear your opinion, you know? It's just the agency. So it's I find casting commercials much more difficult than casting narrative stuff.
Yeah, I feel like it's 50-50. Like, I feel if you really are like, this is the one.
Oh, it's happened to me 3 times in a row, and we ended up casting not the one.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever done the thing where you like, the reco is like the one, and then you kind of maybe throw in a sandbag or two?
Yes, and they'll always cast the sandbag.
I know, I did that recently, and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. I was doing a commercial where they wanted a Midwestern PTA mom, and just as a ringer, we put in this woman with a British accent. That was pretty much like a British Robin Wright pen.
Yeah.
And it was for this Japanese video game company. And then they're like, yeah, we got to go with her. And I'm like, the whole concept is about her being this PTA mom in like the Midwest. And they're like, Japanese find people speaking very proper about very silly things very funny. And I'm like, okay.
Honestly, that is true, though. People love Ted Lasso.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
A lot of British people, plus Jason Sudeikis. Anyways, continue.
Okay, next thing. Agency scripts. Sometimes they're not that great, and you try to change them and fix them and plus them, and they'll be like, thank you, and then the copywriter will cancel all the changes you made. They just want you to do what they wrote, because it's their job.
I joke that we get hired to make things funny and great, and we like have all these great ideas, and that's how you get the job. But then you just go back to the original boards.
You guys, that's why I'm always like improv, right? Because improv and rewriting the joke or the tag are the same thing.
See, you say this, and agencies always say we want improv, but from my experience, A, they never use a lot of improv, but B, this goes back to like shot lists and storyboards. They want to know what we're shooting. Mm-hmm. At least my team wants to know what we're shooting before we go there. And I'm always pressed on time. So I'm never going to be like, yeah, let's try it 10 different ways, because already the agency has asked us to do it 10 different ways.
But I think that 10 different ways is different than like, oh, I can sharpen this button. Right. We're really, what I'm really saying is like, if the core of the idea is bad, if there's not any true comedic value to what they're aiming at, that's one thing. But if it's just like a little dull and could just be cleaned up and tightened and sharpened, and they don't see that exactly, sometimes showing them will illuminate that. I had a job not that long ago, actually, that like I had a really good creative experience with the whole agency, and the spot is funnier because of it, for sure. And it took a little bit of time, and also, you know, in auditions you can kind of like try and get people there, and it's maybe under the auspices of like, you know, filling in the holes of what would be a montage or whatever, but you can kind of find stuff and sort of, again, set the table, set expectations, and sort of, you know, it starts as quote unquote improv, and then eventually sort of just becomes the script. That can happen. That does happen.
Yeah. In my experience, there's been really great creatives that write really amazing things, or like what you're saying, we work together to make a better script. But I'd say about 50% of the time, the copywriters are sensitive and they want to shoot what they wrote. And you can do improv and you can try to show them that this is funnier and people can laugh and whatever. But when the edit comes through, the production company says, let's give them a version as scripted. This just literally today happened. There's a director's cut and there's like the as legal asked us to scripted cut. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to go with the as legal asked us to scripted cut. So great. So I wasted a ton of time on set shooting this stuff. So that's my, I still try to do it and I still try to plus things when I can. But like, at least for me, I find that like going with the flow and then just doing slight moves.
I think we're saying the same thing though, right?
Yeah. But I'm just saying this is one of the cons of directing commercials is that you cannot come in and like really reform any dialogue in the way that you could with, if you made a short film or you made a thing, even if you worked with like a write, even if you didn't write it, a feature, TV might be a little different, but there's like egos involved in a different way. And there's a lot of the client approved it. So this is what we have to do, language that's used in advertising. So my last two complaints about prepping jobs are,
boy. We may have to hustle. This is
I know.
We have to hustle this along, buddy.
Okay, I'm going. Non-union casting. Every agency wants to do it now. It just drives me totally bonkers. And if you make the shittiest, lowest budget short in the world, you can use SAG actors. But you'll do a $500,000 commercial, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we decided to go non-union." You're like, "Why?" Like, "Yeah, we just want to put it everywhere without paying anyone." You're like, "Well, we'll get way better actors if we go union." And they'll be like, "Yeah, they want to go non-union." And it's frustrating. And I'm sure you guys agree. And then, and the last thing is like the yes-anding of all bad ideas that we have to do. I find that grating on my soul. Okay, let's hop into production. And maybe is it cool if we do the same thing? I'll kind of run through this list and you guys can just plus it.
Yeah.
Okay, so something I've found a lot lately is that I'm kind of like stuck between the crew and the agency. The agency wants to get all these things, and the DP is like, "Oh, let's do this cool shot or this cool shot," and you agree with the DP, but you have to say, "I'm sorry, we can't do that because the agency just asked us to do 5 versions of this thing, and we're not going to have time to set up this dolly shot that you think is really cool, that I also think is cool." But I'm finding that I'm negotiating between my crew, my production designer who like wants to put a really cool thing, my costumer, my cinematographer, and the agency, and not really going by what I love artistically or creatively, but by what I feel like the agency wants me to do.
There's a couple things,
and they're also paying the bills, which so it makes sense.
Right. I think the thing that's tricky is that you don't want your team to check out. Right, like that's really what we're talking about this whole way through. If we check out, A, we don't work more, but B, like the thing isn't as good as it could be, and that means that we don't get to do more work, and we're also unhappy because of it, right? But that same thing happens to all of your department heads. So you can every once in a while be like, "Hey, listen, I know it would be better. I really just need you to do the simple version because we've got other stuff to get to." But like you do that too many times in a row, and they just check out. I've seen it happen before, where people are just like, "Okay, I see what this is now. I'll just hose it down. I got it." And it hurts. Boy,
I put it on a tripod and the DP is like on their phone.
Yeah, it stings. Right? It's nothing.
You're asking them to do nothing.
It's brutal. Yeah. And it's hard to not take it personally.
Yeah.
This also, the agency has to approve every take that you do. If you want to move on to the next setup, they have to say, good. And oftentimes, if you've done 2 takes and you think they're great, there will be someone that will be like, well, should we try it like this? And you're like, okay. And you have to do all these extra takes because a lot of people, and this is a mean way to think of it. I don't think it's exactly true, but sometimes people feel like they need to justify their being on set, and one way to do that is to ask to try a few different versions, even if the takes we got are great and we're 2 hours behind,
It's very slow.
And then on top of that, these takes, and this is something I feel like the agency doesn't care enough about, but I'm always anxious about it, is we're making 30-second commercials and 15-second commercials, and like a line needs to fit in 3 seconds sometimes. So if the camera pans over, they say their line and they, take a step and do something, you're like, no, that this is taking you too long. You need to say your line as you're doing this thing. And, just this thing you have to worry about that you never would have to worry about in a narrative project, not to this fine a point. And you might have to shoot something a little, like, let's drop 2 words for the 15-second version. Just these things that are like removing the art and the being in the moment and making it just so technical for a non-artistic, purpose.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't bother me as long as everyone is aware of how long 15 seconds are and what all of the deliverables are, because then you can prep for it. It gets a little crunchier when it's like a loose 30, but also we've got 15. We've got a laundry list of other deliverables that we haven't really thought about. That can get hard. I just like to prepare more. I like to be able to be like, okay, we know exactly how long this 15-second spot is. This is what we're gonna pick up the pieces for it. And I think that speaks to, Oren, your point of like, it's our job to just be prepared as possible to execute the exact thing that we need. And if the target's moving, that's when it gets frustrating.
Yeah, and timing how long a line is not fun. It's much more fun to be like, ooh, let's try a version where you're like, yelling at her or whatever. And then on the same note of times, we have these insane aspect ratios that everyone asks us to keep, like shoot at 9:16 safe. And basically you're compromising your framing all the time. And then you see your friends that are doing narrative stuff, shooting anamorphics and these beautiful shots. And you're like, we could never shoot a shot like that because you can't reframe it for Instagram.
I've made my peace with that. And here's my new mentality, Carlyn. I'd love to hear what you think. I just think of whatever the main thing is. Like, I just ask, what's the hero thing? What's the media buy? Is it all going to be on social? Is it going to be on YouTube? What's the most important? And typically there's an answer. And then I can say, okay, great. I'm going to prioritize 9:16, and the 16:9 will look fine. But you have to be okay with one of them not looking incredible.
How many spots on your website are 9:16?
None. But I think soon, actually, I'm going to have a couple. I think of this next batch. Also, I don't think I sent this to you, Oren. A DP I just worked with sent me a different cropping composition than I'd ever seen before. Normally, when we think of 9:16 and 16:9 and the same thing, you're just kind of like slicing the middle out, right? So you end up with a ton of negative space on either side of the frame, or a terrible 9:16 shot. But he sent me a frame guide that's more like a T. So you're actually cropping the 9:16 as well.
Right.
Like, so everything's getting cropped. What was that?
Like an Alexa open gate framing.
Maybe, yeah.
Like 4:3, and you have kind of frame.
Yes, for exactly. It's similar to that. It's not exactly that, but what's nice about it is that it just kind of makes composing a tiny bit easier, especially if you think of the 9:16 as a sliding option. Do you know what I mean? If you can move that around in the frame to grab the right piece for it. But if you're not thinking of using the entire frame of the of 16:9, that's what I think makes the greater complication.
Yeah, I guess all these things I'm listing are the things that kind of make commercial directing like anti-cinema, and like that's one of them, is like worrying about these vertical framings and then having the agency be like, it's touching the edge of the frame, and you having to run over to the video village and say, yeah, but we can move it. You see, we can like actually slide this frame over. And they're like, okay, well, can you just frame it in, just do a take where it's framed in the middle? Matt, you're looking at me like that doesn't happen, but it
happens. He believes you.
100%. That definitely happens. Ideally, you have a good client producer who knows that and saves you that conversation. It's okay for a client to not know that. That's, if they were filmmakers, they'd be doing our jobs for us anyway, right? So it's reasonable that they're like, oh yeah, I work in marketing or whatever. But ideally, someone is there in the Video Village specifically to field those sorts of questions.
Yes, if they're really great and technical and understand that as well. But yeah, it's just a frustration of mine. Is like worrying about these things and having people pinpoint things. And that'll take me to my last. I have a bazillion other things about production, but I'm going to end it with one last one, which is I find this on commercials a lot, and it's related to what we just talked about, where the entire take needs to be perfect. Like you're doing a take, and maybe the boom mic came in one part of the take, but you know that you will never use that part of the take because we're going to cut to this close-up, but just like in the boards. And they're like, yeah, we saw the boom, we need to do it again. And you're like, well, we don't, because we're never going to use that part, like for 10 different reasons. But you have these people basically looking at the entire length of the shot, and they want it all to be perfect, even though you know in your mind that you're going to be editing this thing. And you can use the front take of this close-up, the front part of this close-up and the end part of this wide shot, but the client just wants to see it all, done in one shot, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, in a word, sometimes I feel demoralized on set as a creative because or you think you were hired because you could make this thing good and you can make it funny, you can make it look great, and yet that's often not the job. And so it's super frustrating to be on set and in your heart that this isn't going to cut together, or this isn't going to be funny, or this isn't going to work, and yet you have to do whatever they say. And like I had a commercial recently where I started really pushing back on the client, and the agency producer pulled me aside and she was like, you can't keep telling her no. And I'm like, she's asking insane. Like this client is asking for like stuff that doesn't we've already shot half that scene. We'd have to reshoot the whole scene. I mean, and she was just like, just do it. And I was like, okay, I give up.
Yeah.
I give up. At some point you're like, I can't. And so.
And you're working with like the best, top-notch companies.
Yeah, but and I wonder, like, do we have to be like big DGA commercial directors to really get to do the cool, like Geico, whatever, the really cool, interesting, artsy stuff? Or is this just the job?
I think it's just the job. Job.
Okay, so, and by the way, I love production. It's all fun. I love agencies. I love producers and everything. I'm just explaining my point of view on why the fun of narrative is not always like translated into the fun of commercial making, because you just can't call the shots as a director in commercials like you do in narrative. In narrative, you're kind of prioritizing art, the creative and the artistic merit of what you're making in performances. And in commercials, there are a lot of other elements that are potentially more important than those things, that make directing challenging and very fun and satisfying ways. Okay, so finally, we'll just spend 5 minutes on post-production because I guess in commercials, one of the craziest things always for me is the schedule. So you'll finish shooting on a Friday. Matt did this Halloween campaign last year. It's like you shot on a Sunday, and I was doing a few visual effects shots, and on like Monday morning, they're like, "Hey, where's the shots, man?" I mean, it's like maybe it wasn't quite that bad, but it's like literally sometimes you're shooting on a Sunday and it comes out on Sunday.
One of the spots had aired actually at that point when they were
yes.
They did the edit overnight.
I think the first one was like a oneer. It wasn't crazy, but that was an insane schedule. We were cranking really
do
hard.
Like color and sound and stuff.
We colored on set.
Exactly.
I had a fancy DIT.
But then you don't get to put the same, like your narrative project, you don't get to put that same amount of, you don't get to try a million different things out, in post.
The only time I've gotten to really work if the agencies, if it's a commercial job with no agency, then I get a lot of creative
that's interesting.
leeway in post. But if there's an agency involved, it doesn't, I can give the best notes, I can have a great cut. It doesn't matter. It's not up to me. I don't call the shots. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just cynical about post these days, but I'm like, what's the point?
And that's where your spot is,
made or broken.
Yeah.
I feel like I heard once upon a time that, when you get a little bit bigger, you can just demand a director's cut be finished to completion. And I don't know if that's still a thing or not.
Well, so I guess I had a lot of random things. I'm not going to talk about them, but I will talk about the director's cut, which is, I think, this idea that we all have. We're like, well, there's always a director's cut. It'll be the way I like it. And that'll be for me, and the agency will have their cut. But, then you have to shepherd your director's cut through color and through sound and through music. And then you're starting to give notes on your director's cut. And people are like, well, we have way too many notes on this other cut. And it to me, I don't know about you guys, but it's very rare that I end up with like my perfect director's cut on a job, just because I don't have the time to babysit the director's cut through all these stages, and the ability to kind of beg the company to make my cut for me. There are some companies, the Sawhorse guys, they tend to like my cuts better, and because they're doing post themselves, they will like help me finish my cut so they can use it for their own work as well, know. But my best director's cuts are like, I take the final cut of the client cut and I'll re-edit it a little bit. I'll change out the music, or I'll change some.
But how do you do that? Like, do you get a drive from them or something?
I try to always ask for the stems, the dialogue and the music and the effects separately. And then, I'd say like 50% of the time I recolor things a little bit too, because I tend to fall in love with the color that I saw on set, and then the colorist takes it in like some totally different direction. And so I try to kind of bring it back to the color I loved.
So you do your own director's cuts, essentially.
Yeah, but on top of like the finished cut. Like, I'm not getting like terabytes of raw footage and doing all that stuff.
You're not swapping takes where you're like, I really wish that they'd used this version or whatever. Yeah.
On rare occasion, if I happen to have the footage, I really feel strongly about swapping a take, I'll do it. But then the sound mix, is off.
Yeah.
So but I try to do that because sometimes, we work so hard to get to the shoot and to get our alts and to do our things and to get that cool dolly shot. And then a lot of it gets thrown away in post. So, every commercial you do, you want it to be good enough to make your website.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the edit tends to not be the thing that determines whether it's going to be good in my eyes or not. Like I feel like it happens earlier. I feel like maybe just the jokes don't land, or like casting got messed up, or like an edit can make something better, but like if you're polishing a turd, it's still a turd, I guess is what I'm getting at. And so
yeah, but how many times have you shot stuff that's like really funny and then the final cut is like not that funny?
So many times. Yeah.
So many.
I feel like with the edit, I always see that first cut and I'm so depressed. And then by the time we're done, it's better. And I'm like, well, maybe this is as good as it can be. And then 6 months later, I'm like, well, obviously it could be better. But I'm not going to crack it open again. That's the truth.
Well, anyway, thank you for listening to me. Thank you, Carlyn, for commiserating with me. Thank you, Matt, for negating everything I said. But yeah, that's the hope is that maybe there's like a little bit of insight as to like what our experiences are with directing commercials. I think hopefully people that already direct commercials can relate to some of this stuff. Like I love hearing, like Jordan Brady on his podcast complain about long treatments and whatever. And for people that are interested in commercials, hopefully we've turned you off. So we don't have to compete with you.
Exactly.
No, I'm just kidding. But just a commercial is not a 30-second version of your like awesome short film. It's fun and it's rewarding and it can be super satisfying in many ways, but it's challenging in ways that narrative filmmaking is not. That's my soapbox. Do you guys want to do some unpaid endorsements real quick?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Unpaid endorsements.
So my unpaid endorsement is the movie Val. Have you guys watched Val?
Oh, Val Kilmer documentary.
The Val Kilmer documentary is really great. It's really, you watch those movies and you forget about how cool and weird exciting Val Kilmer was, and like, you know, he really did document so much of his life. He's got crazy vaults that you see, like the amount of work it takes just to kind of log all that footage and turn it into something special is a feat unto itself. But the movie's really thoughtful and moving and fun, and it's on Amazon Prime. Val, recommending it.
Well, yes, I've heard people like it, and I will check it out.
Okay, I have a book.
Yeah, this Carlyn.
It's called Empire of Pain. It's a it's nonfiction by this guy. I have the book literally in my lap. This is pretty annoying. Patrick Keefe, and it's about the Sackler family who were responsible for Valium and then most recently the opioid crisis.
Yes.
And it's like a 3 generations, kind of like how, you know, the original Sackler started as like just the American dream, and they were ambitious, and how it got to where they are now. And it's my favorite kind of nonfiction because it's riveting. I mean, I just started it 2 days ago, and I'm already like 120 pages in. I have so much work to do, and I can't put this book down. It's so good.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a bit depressing, but it's incredible.
And a little piece of fun trivia is that previous podcast guest, Micah Fitzerman Blue, is one of the showrunners, producers. It's one of the writers behind the Netflix show based on the book.
There's a Netflix show based on the book?
Yeah, it's about the Sattlers. It's directed by Peter
Peter
Berg.
This book just came out, though. So
that's how Hollywood works, baby.
I'm like, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, like, you know, a big high-profile book.
Wait, when did it come out?
Advances on,
the book came out like last month.
Yeah, but books are sold well before they're published.
Yeah, but are they sold years before they're published? I don't think so.
Maybe it's not based on the book. No, it says there's an article, a New Yorker article, The Family That Built an Empire of Pain.
That is the same author. So I think that's maybe this is just a longer version of the article.
Patrick
He is a New Yorker writer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There you go.
So they must have optioned the article. That makes sense.
That's how Hollywood works. That makes complete
Yes.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, their respective masterworks serve as the underlying material for the series. Okay, so I'm going to just give a really short one because we're running super long. And it is a recommendation that when you are making web videos, make them loud. Get your dialogue at like -6 to -3 dB because a lot of people are watching this stuff on their phones. And there's
sure.
Do you guys know about these September 21 videos?
Mm-hmm.
From Demi Adejuyipe?
Yeah.
Something
one
like
of
that.
Andy Young's friends, apparently.
I did not know that. But so he's made, there's the song about the 21st night of September. And he's made a video.
I remember.
That has come out. Yeah, you do remember. On September 21st every year.
21st of September?
Since 2016. And I was watching them all on my phone. And the newest one, which is like this 8-minute epic, September 21st video, I just found it to be a little quiet. And I was like, had my phone on full blast. And it's like, video is probably really good, but I can barely hear it. Anyhow.
We'll talk to him.
So just make your web videos loud, please.
Yeah.
Because people watch them on their phones, sometimes in loud environments, and it just makes everyone's life easier.
I hope
don't mix them like
Earth, Wind and Fire.
Yeah, don't mix them like a feature film where your dialogue is like at -12 and like, whatever. That's like one of my pet peeves when people mix web videos or web ads like they would mix the movie for the theater. That's my recommendation.
Interesting unpaid endorsement.
No, it's very unpaid.
I like the idea of maybe tweaking dialogue mixing for speakerphone. Do you know what I mean? That. That's where I thought you were headed. Like a music track is a little different, but like mixing, maybe like cutting out a little bit more of the bass, like making it more audible if you're like imagining that someone's like kind of like watching this video at the grocery store or whatever, which happened to me today. Someone was watching a video in front of me online.
Yeah,
it was
and
Oren.
There's dialogue in this video. It's not the music part. It doesn't really matter to me. Just the dialogue. This episode is edited by our old editor, Jay McCullough. Thank you, Jay.
Very old.
Excited to have you back.
Pinch hitting for us, Jay. Thanks.
If you have any comments on commercial directing, want to let us know what you think, what you disagree, if you even like these types of episodes where we go on random lists of on a specific topic, please let us know at justshootitpod@gmail.com. You can also follow us across all social media at justshootitpod. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at SmiteyPyleg, and on Instagram, I'm at OKaplan.
You can follow me at Mr. Matt Enlow. And you can follow Carlyn at Hey Carlyn on Instagram, right?
No, it's Carlyn Hudson on Instagram. It's Hey Carlyn on Twitter, and I don't tweet much, so good luck.
Yeah, there you go. Carlyn,
Thank you, Carlyn.
It's a treat.
Please send me Ray-Ban
always.
offers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay.
Shady Rays would be okay too.
And thank you, the artist Jazar.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.